All right, welcome. Today we are diving headfirst into a really fascinating and frankly pretty mind-bending spiritual take on one of the biggest questions there is. Where does life actually come from? We're digging into a text that basically challenges everything we think we know about biology. Okay, let's get into it. So where do you even begin? Well, it all starts with this one seemingly simple question. What is life? It's a question that's kept scientists and philosophers busy for centuries, right? But the source material we're looking at today suggests that maybe, just maybe, we've been looking for the answer in completely the wrong place. The typical approach is to break life down into its smallest parts. You've got your cells, your molecules, your atoms. We study the physical stuff, the matter, thinking that if we can just understand the hardware, we'll figure out how the software works. But our source says that's kind of like trying to understand a person by only studying their jacket. Now here's where it gets interesting. The author points to this quote from a pioneer in artificial life research, no less, as this little hint of truth popping up in mainstream science. The idea is that life isn't really about the what, the carbon, the water, the stuff. It's about the how. It's about the pattern, the information, the blueprint that tells all that matter what to do. And that idea is the perfect launching pad for the core concept of this text. It gives us a totally new definition of life, arguing that it's not a physical thing at all. The author calls it the antimatter structure. Whoa, okay, hold on. Before your mind jumps to physics and particle accelerators, let's be clear. The author is using antimatter in a more philosophical way. It's their term for anything that has a shape and a structure but zero physical mass. Think about it. Our thoughts, our consciousness, even just pure information. According to this view, that is the real essence of life. I know, that's a pretty abstract concept to wrap your head around. So to make it a little more concrete, the author uses this fantastic, if a little old-school analogy. They tell us to think about a fax machine. Okay, check out how this works. The original sheet of paper, that's the matter, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays right there with you. What actually travels across the phone line is just the information, the pattern. You could call it the soul of the document. And that information then prints itself onto a brand new piece of paper thousands of miles away. See, the information is totally separate from the physical thing carrying it. That's the whole idea of the antimatter structure. So if life is really this non-physical structure, this soul, how does it actually exist and interact with the physical world? Well, the author proposes a really simple, kind of elegant formula to explain how it all comes together. And this is the absolute key. Life isn't just one thing. It's the fusion of two completely different things. A physical body by itself, that's just matter. It's a corpse. And the soul, the antimatter structure, by itself, it's just an invisible spirit. According to this text, it's only when you bring them together, when the soul moves into the body, that you get what we call life. 1 + 1 = 1. But here's the twist. The author says this is not a partnership of equals, not even close. In this union of body and soul, it's the soul, our consciousness, that's firmly in the driver's seat, calling all the shots. And to prove it, the text shares some truly startling stories. Get ready for this one, it's pretty chilling. The text gives this example. A prisoner is told he's going to be executed by bleeding out. He's blindfolded. They make a tiny scratch on his wrist, not a real cut, and then they start dripping water into a pan nearby. The prisoner hears the dripping, and he believes with every fiber of his being that he is bleeding to death. And what happens? His body just shuts down. He dies, not from any physical injury, but because his own consciousness, his own belief, killed him. And the examples just keep piling up. The source talks about a severed snake's head that still managed to bite its killer hours later, supposedly powered by some residual consciousness. It tells stories of swapped hospital charts, where a perfectly healthy man who was told he was dying withered away, while a terminally ill man told he was fine suddenly thrived. The author even points to things like the curse of the pharaohs and a supposedly haunted car as evidence that consciousness can literally attach itself to things and influence the physical world. Okay, so if that's what life is, this powerful fusion of soul and matter, then the next huge question is, where did it all come from? Well, get ready, because the author's creation story is, let's just say it's going to throw everything you learned in science class right out the window. Forget the Big Bang. In this version of events, Earth comes first, pinched off from some kind of cosmic ball of dough. Then, the sun is literally transported into position specifically to serve the Earth. After that, angels show up and begin a massive terraforming project, creating the oceans and the atmosphere and the moon. The text describes it as an artificial structure, built in a giant space station using metals from Earth, all to give us tides and keep the planet stable. The whole solar system is presented as this bespoke, custom-built creation. Now, according to the author, not all life on this custom-built planet was made the same way. The simplest life forms, things like microbes and fungi, they just sort of popped up spontaneously where conditions were right. Then you have slightly more complex things, like moss, which were born from moisture changing the structure of soil. But all the really complex stuff, we're talking trees, animals, all the creatures we know, were intentionally designed by these celestial beings in what are described as underwater pyramid laboratories. And this all leads to a very clear, very firm conclusion in the text. There is no evolution between complex species. The author's logic is, a car doesn't evolve from a bicycle. You have to design a car from scratch. And in the same way, they state, a monkey is always a monkey. It was created that way, and it will never, ever evolve into a human. Wow, okay, so we've gone from phantom executions to celestial engineers building the moon. That is a lot to take in. So what's the ultimate point here? What's the big takeaway from this whole spiritual perspective on life? What does it all mean for how we live, and maybe even more importantly, how we die? It really all boils down to this one powerful idea, which is summed up perfectly in this quote from the source. It argues that the physical death of the body is just a symptom. What dies first is the soul, our consciousness, our thoughts, our will to live. When our consciousness gives up, the body just follows. It completely flips our whole understanding of life and death on its head, suggesting the real battle is always fought in our minds. And that's the big idea we want to leave you with. It's a profound and definitely challenging concept. But whether you see it as a spiritual truth or just a really cool thought experiment, it forces us to ask this one final question. If the reality we experience is fundamentally shaped, maybe even created by our own consciousness, what does that make possible? Thanks for watching.